And Jim Trusty, he's former DOJ prosecutor, and I think that he's there. Oh, there he is. We have documents, but then we have him as well. Okay, so based on the reporting so far, does it look like the search warrant was all on the up and up, like everything followed according to procedure?
Well, these are lengthy search warrants. I think there's several wrapped into the disclosure today. It's like 265 pages. When I used to supervise prosecutors looking for search warrants, I always thought if it was too long a search warrant, their case stank. But I think their evidence was actually pretty strong here. There's a lot of stock language, and for whatever reason, Southern District of New York mustn't like trees. They like to have pretty long documents. Most of what you can see in there is pretty standard form in terms of looking at Cohen's financial misdeeds, you know, the taxi medallions, mortgage application fraud, loan fraud. The part that would be of interest is obviously the campaign finance violations, which is redacted.
Right.
So that also says that SDNY still has an active case there.
Was it a surprise to you to learn that this case had really opened up earlier than had at least been reported back in July of 2017?
Not really. I mean, I don't want to pat myself on the back on that either, but I would just say, look, most cases don't go overt until they're pretty far downstream. So it's not a shock. I think there's still interesting questions about the handoff between special counsel and SDNY and kind of where the lines were drawn. We don't know that yet, but I think the timing is not that big a surprise. Federal investigations tend to take a while before they surface.
What about this issue of triggerfish, or this technique, this use? Is that maybe it is a lot more common than people think?
I wouldn't say it's all that common. I mean, it's a technique that's been around for a while. I don't think this was something where they were using it to try to intercept contents in real time. So I wouldn't equate that to a wiretap. I think it's probably geolocation and knowing where this guy is, which could mean that they're trying to corroborate him on an important point, or it could mean they're trying to find out if he's lying to them about an important point.
Let me ask you about another thing. Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, apparently Bill Barr, the new Attorney General, has asked the DAG to stay on a little bit longer. He was meant to be leaving in mid-March. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I'm not privy to the conversation, so I guess I don't know for sure. But I do think it makes sense to have Rod around to have the institutional knowledge of the Mueller probe still available to all when the probe breaks, when the report goes public. So I suspect Barr is being pretty pragmatic, that, you know, teaching up the next DAG to replace Rod and answer questions about it is a pretty tall task. And I think he probably likes the idea of having a little institutional carryover until that's done.
Anything else that we should be looking at in the last seconds that I have with you when it comes to these Cohen documents?
No, I don't think the Cohen documents, it's unusual to have search warrants that go public. That's really a function of the press insisting on it. It does tell me that Cohen's case, in most respects for him, seems to be long gone. I don't buy it for a minute when he says that he's essentially an active cooperator with SDNY. If they're going to build a case, it's going to be around him, not through him.
All right, Jim Trusty, we appreciate your expertise as always. Thank you.
Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein has reached an agreement with Attorney General William Barr to stay on at the Justice Department for, quote, a little while longer. Rosenstein, who planned to step down in mid-March, is still the main liaison between the department and special counsel Robert Mueller, but it's Barr who has had main oversight of the probe since his confirmation. Joining me now is Tom Fitton, the president of Judicial Watch. Good to see you, Tom. So isn't it about time for Rosenstein to move on?
Look, it seems to me that Mueller is still running the Justice Department. The Attorney General has got to take back control of his Justice Department. Rod Rosenstein and Mueller have been working closely together on this abusive investigation targeting President Trump. Rosenstein is responsible for obstruction of congressional investigations, covering up every which way he can details about the abuses of the Justice Department and the FBI in targeting President Trump and others. And it's just remarkable to me that the Attorney General continues to have him in place in this position of power. He's effectively running the Justice Department as number two. That's what the DAG does. And by outsourcing control of the Justice Department to Rod Rosenstein, Mr. Barr is sending a signal that it's business as usual at the deep state.
How long do you think he'll be there? I mean, it can't go on that much longer, can it?
Well, I think they've nominated someone to take over his slot. So, you know, but it could be 4, 5, 6 months before that position's filled. So he could continue to, as you highlight at the beginning of the segment, effectively collaborate with Mr. Mueller as he continues this presidential harassment campaign.
Well, meanwhile, we're learning a little bit more about the deep state and the witch hunt through the Michael Cohen revelations. The search warrant was released. There's so much of it is redacted. Have you tried reading in between the redactions to try to come to some conclusion about it?
You know, I think the big takeaway of this is that you had the Mueller operation behind the abusive effort to impede on the president's attorney-client relationship with Michael Cohen. They immediately began dismantling that expectation of privacy that clients have for communications with their attorneys almost immediately upon his coming into office, Mr. Mueller. And then they outsourced it to the Southern District of New York later, but they weren't really fooling anyone because they were obviously operating as avatars for Mueller in raiding Cohen in that really unusual raid of an attorney. You know, the president's attorney was subject to investigation. I don't think they had good reason to target him other than the fact he was the president's attorney. And again, Mueller behind an audacious attack on the president. You know, I tell you, the Attorney General has got to figure out what's going on there. And if I were him, I'd freeze the whole operation till he figures out what's up and down in terms of all the peculiar activities and corruption involved in the operation, including Strzok Page, the hiring, the firing, the FISA warrants. Why would he allow that investigation to go forward given all of the concerns about abuse of the Justice Department and the FBI?
Well, and the concerns now are boiling over in the American public. I mean, it's not, you don't have to be a fervent Trump supporter in order to believe it's a witch hunt. Now the majority of Americans do. They got the message. They understand it. I mean, there is enough evidence and there's enough push, I think, from the public itself to justify ending this thing, no?
I agree. You know, the Justice Department was in court today arguing that states attorney, Maryland and other states had no business harassing the president on this emoluments clause absurd litigation.
Yeah.
Yet the Justice Department seems to take the position they have a right to harass the president. And they can investigate him any way they want. And this Mueller report is being used as a way to further abuse the president, hanging it over him. And just causing worry and consternation about the operation of our government. Again, this is the Justice Department. The President, under our Constitution, controls the Justice Department, yet the Justice Department is operating as if it's a fourth branch of government. And the Attorney General, I think, needs to fix that.
Well, despite all of this, despite all the roadblocks to success, the president continues to chalk up victories, the most recent with the Supreme Court over immigration. It was a close decision. It was 5-4. But we read some comments by Justice Thomas just moments ago. What do you think of this decision?
Well, it's a big victory for the rule of law. It's a case that goes back to the Obama administration, so this wasn't even a Trump administration policy. Look, the left is attacking our efforts to uphold the rule of law on immigration by affording illegal aliens rights they're not due under our Constitution. And in this case, they wanted aliens who were released and not picked up immediately by ICE. Wanted to give them the ability, despite having committed crimes for which they had been jailed otherwise, to be out free on the streets. And the court said, no, the law doesn't allow that. And, you know, just because ICE gets around later to arresting someone who ought to be detained doesn't mean they give up their rights to detain them. And it's a common sense decision, but the closeness shows that there's this legal effort underway to undermine the rule of law on immigration. And I tell you, you know, a further challenge to this law may succeed with the Supreme Court. And again, it will be just open borders mania as a result.
Well, and as I said, I was disappointed. It was as close. It was a win, but it shouldn't have been a 5-4 decision. And yet there you go. Tom Fitton, great to see you, my friend. Thank you very much for being here.
General, first, to the Supreme Court decision. What is your take on that? Will it stop criminal illegals from coming?
Well, it's great to be with you. I think it's exactly the right decision. We should be able to hold these illegal aliens that are criminals until we deport them. You know, as a soldier who has fought overseas, it's rather disheartening to see the undercurrent of liberalism here that's trying to undermine our national security. And so this is a win for the president, it's a win for the country, it's a win for our national security, because these ill-intended individuals need to be back where they came from.
You know, General, 400 people apprehended in 5 minutes in El Paso, Texas, trying to cross. Your take on that?
Well, my hat's off to law enforcement and officials that executed that apprehension and that were able to prevent that surge of illegal immigrants coming across the border. It goes to highlight the problem that we face, and you know, it is every day on the border. These border agents are facing maybe not 400, but something on the scale from you know, 50 to 400 trying to get across the border. So it's a problem, and it's a national emergency, as the president says, and he needs that money to finish building the wall so we can funnel the illegal immigrants into the stations where they're supposed to be crossing.
Yeah, the Pentagon has given Congress a list of construction projects, including dozens in California. California Governor Gavin Newsom won't be happy about that. Where do you see that heading?
Well, yeah, I think it's fair. The president increased the military budget by billions and billions of dollars, and so it's fair for him to be able to look at that and say, you know, let's take you know, $4 to $8 billion from the construction budget, and here's the list. You know, the secretary was asked to provide the list to Congress of what might be impacted, and so everybody's getting a look to see that because they didn't give the president the money, some of it might be coming out of their home districts, and so voters might not be too happy about that in the long run for these congressmen that lose projects in their district. But at the end of the day, it's the right call for the president.
General, great to see you. Thanks for coming in. Come back soon.